Hi, it's Mr. Brunsmith. I'm going to show you how to fill out your U.S. government recommended diet sheet. This is it on the computer, of course. If you have the packet, you hand it out. You can do it on there. I, however, do not have that packet, so I made myself a version of the packet here to show you guys how to do this because some people might find this a little bit complicated. Now, before we start figuring this out, what we really need to do is figure out this right here, total calories per day recommended for me. A lot of you guys did that at the very beginning of this unit. We figured that out. It's one of the very first things that we did is we figured it out, your approximate daily caloric needs. We went to a website. If you have that number right there, you can just transfer it down and put it in this line right here. Right there, okay? And that's going to be the same. If you don't have that, that's no big deal. You can look it up. If you click on this link right here and go to this website, it's actually going to help you calculate that out. I'll show you guys how to do that. So you can enter your own information on this. For age, because I am 40, which I'm sure I've told you guys before, I am just going to enter 40. I am male. I am 6 feet 1 inches tall. 165 is actually very accurate for me. I am 166. And when I go to activity, I'm going to put moderate exercise for me because I'm a relatively active person. A lot of you guys, no offense, are going to be sedentary or light exercise, especially during this break. If you've been sitting around not doing much, you have to put moderate or light. If you've been working out almost every single day, put moderate. If you're pretty darn active, put active, and most of you aren't going to be in this category yet. So for me, I'm going to put moderate, and I'm going to click calculate, and it's going to show me this number here that says maintain weight, 2,515. So on my sheet here that I made that looks like your sheet, I'm going to put that down, 2,515. Now that's the number I'm going to work with. What we have to do now is figure out the percentage of our total calories that should come from carbs, fats, and proteins. Now you can find that in your packet. We've already given that to you. It's on the very last page. If we go to here, it says 10 to 25% should come from protein, 20 to 35% should come from fat, 45 to 65 from carbohydrates. Now those are ranges. To make it a little simpler with the math, we're going to kind of come up with an average. So carbohydrates will do first. And because it says there 45 to 65%, we're going to make that 55%. So in our carbohydrates box, I'm going to put 55%. That's going to make it easier for us to figure this out later. And then we go to fats. Fats are 20 to 35%, as we can see right here. We'll make that 30%. Nice round number there. 30% of your total calories per day should come from fat. Next up, we have protein. If we look in the top left corner here, protein 10 to 25%. We're going to do 15 because that's what we have left. We've already got 55% and 30%. What's left? 15%, of course. It's going to make us easier to figure out just 1% than figuring out a range. Now we have to figure out my daily caloric needs. So if I'm supposed to have 2,515 calories a day, and 55% of those calories are supposed to come from carbohydrates, how many calories a day am I supposed to get from carbohydrates? Well, we got to do some math to figure that out, right? I have to figure out what 55% of 2,515 is. And this number is going to be different than your number because you're not going to have 2,515 as your number. You're going to have a different number. So how do we figure out what 55% is? Easiest way to do that will be to put 55% as a fraction. If I have 55%, anytime you want to make something into a fraction, you just have to move the decimal point, which is here, over 2 spots to the left. So 55% is going to equal 0.55, right? So what I have to do is take this number here, 2,515, and multiply that by 0.55, and I'm going to get 55%. Now I can't do that in my head, and I'm using my phone to videotape this. So I'm going to find my online calculator here, and I'm just going to multiply this out. 2515 multiplied by 0.55, and I get, we're just going to round that down, 1383. So that's how I figured that out. 1383, right? Now let's do that for the other ones as long as we're on the right track here. If I want to find 30% of something, remember I have to move the decimal point, which is here, over 2 spots to the left. 30% is going to be 0.30. So if I take my total calories, 2515, multiply it by 0.30, what do I get? Well, let's figure it out on my calculator here. 2515 multiplied by 0.3, and I get 754.5. We'll round it up to 755, and I put that right there. Now we have to figure out 15%. Got a little trick for you guys. 15% is half of 30%. So rather than doing all this fancy math down here, all I got to do is take this number, divide it in half. Okay, so I'm going to take 755 divided by 2, and there I go. 377.5, I'm going to round that up to 378. So now I have these first two columns filled out. And again, this is based on my information. My information is 2515. You're going to have your own number, have to do your own math with this sort of stuff. Now we have to figure out how many grams per day. So how many calories per day of carbs we need. That doesn't tell me how many grams per day we need. We need another piece of information to figure this out. We need to figure out how many calories are in a gram. And it's going to be different for carbs, fats, and proteins. So how many calories are in a gram of carbohydrates? We learned that yesterday. We learned that it's 4. There's 4 calories per gram. So all we have to do to find this out is divide the number that we have here by 4. I'm making that small. And we're going to find out that number. So I'm going to take 1,383 and divide it by 4. 1,383 divided by 4. And I get 345 points. I'm going to round that up to 346. And of course, I'm going to put my units on there. So I need 346 grams of carbohydrates every day. Next, we have to figure out how many fats we have. So how many calories are in a gram of fat? We learned yesterday and early in the unit that we have 9 calories per gram of fat. So rather than dividing this by 4, I have to divide this number by 9. 755 divided by 9. Let's figure out what that gets us. And again, you guys are going to do this with your own numbers. If you come up with the exact same numbers that I have, I will know you have done it wrong. 83.8 repeating, we're going to call that 84. As you can see, you need a lot fewer grams of fat than you do of carbohydrates. But they have more than twice as many calories in them though. So the last thing we got to do is figure out for proteins how many grams of proteins we need. Now we know that just like carbohydrates, proteins have 4 calories per gram. So we're going to take 378 and divide it by 4. Well, I'm going to do that. You're going to use your own numbers. 94.5, we'll call it 95 grams. And you will notice when you've done this with your numbers, not my numbers, that the fat and protein grams are going to be pretty close. Even though the daily caloric needs are way different, they're going to be pretty close. Because again, we're dividing fats by 9, and we're dividing proteins by 4, because that's how many calories per gram they have. And this is something that really makes sense because most of the foods that you have that have proteins in them also have fat in them. Think about like chicken, for example. It's got a lot of protein and a lot of fats. Ice cream, protein and fats. Any sort of meat that you have is going to have a lot of protein and fat in it, but not so many carbohydrates. So it makes sense that those would be pretty close to each other. All right? If you want... Now, you guys might look at these numbers and be like, okay, I don't know what these numbers mean. What does 346 grams of carbohydrates look like, for example? Well, a slice of bread is going to be about 15 grams of carbohydrates, depending on the type of bread that you get. You might say, wow, I need to eat a lot of bread to get my carbohydrates for the day. Well, yeah, but you don't only get carbohydrates from bread. A lot of you get way too many of your grams of carbs from sugar each day. You should reduce your sugar intake. If you have a can of Coke, for example, that's got about 40 grams of sugar. So that's going to go just really start filling that up with not the type of carbohydrates that we need in there. You can have potatoes, for example, are a good source. Pasta is a cheap and easy meal that you guys can have. Not ramen noodles. There's way too much sodium in that. But a lot of stuff can go towards this. You also got to remember, I'm fairly heavy at 166 pounds, and I'm very active. So most of you aren't going to have to get 346 grams of carbohydrates every day to maintain your weight. And it is most of our diet. More than half of our diet comes from carbohydrates. If you look at fats and proteins, there's less grams that you need. If you have a Big Mac, for example, I think that's about 35 to 40 grams of fat. So you've got almost half your fat for the day if you have a Big Mac. If you're looking at protein, like an egg is going to be about 6 grams or so. So if you have scrambled eggs, like 4 scrambled eggs, it's going to go, a pretty big chunk of your protein that you're going to have during the day. A pound of meat is going to have right around 115 to 125-ish grams of protein. Now, no one's going to eat an entire pound of meat, but if you can figure out that a pound of meat is about that much, you can kind of figure out if you have a quarter pounder, for example, that's going to be about 30 grams of protein that you're going to get during the day. And if you go on any food label, which we're going to learn about next week, food labels are required to tell you how many grams of carbs, fats, and protein are in everything that you eat. So now that you know how many you need to get each day, you can check out the food labels of what you eat, make sure you're multiplying by the serving size, and you can actually tell how many grams approximately of carbs, fats, and proteins you're getting each day. Email me with questions.